Program Director, the Mlangeni and Ledwaba families, former President Thabo Mbeki, ministers and deputy ministers, the chairperson of the June and Andrew Mlangeni Foundation, Deputy Minister Thengiwe Mkhize, a representative of the Premier of Gauteng, MEC Panyaza Lesufi, Mayor of Johannesburg, Mr. Jeffrey Makubu, the Treasurer General of the African National Congress, and the leadership of the African National Congress, General Shoke, and the leadership of the SANDF, relatives and friends, and fellow mourners. It is indeed with heavy hearts that we gather here this morning to bid a final farewell to our dear father, grandfather, great-grandfather, leader and comrade, Isithwalandwe Siaparankwe, Andrew Moketi Moeti Mlangeni. As we gather here, we are indeed consumed with grief as we mourn the passing of an icon of our struggle. Yet we are also here to celebrate the extraordinary life of a hero of our struggle for freedom and democracy. In the many profound tributes that have been delivered over the past week by a number of people, both here and abroad, the overriding sentiment has been that his passing marks the end of an era. He belonged to an era of tireless struggle, of sacrifice and service, of honor and integrity. It was an era of leaders who embodied the best in humanity. Andrew Mlangeni, as we have heard, was among the very first recruits of Umkhonto weSizwe, the People's Army that fought for liberation. And of course, he was the last surviving Rivonia trialist. He was also the last to testify at that trial. He was given the gift of time that his fellow Rivonia trialists were not. But he was also one of the last of extraordinary generation of freedom fighters. The black, green and gold colors of his movement, the African National Congress, flowed through the veins of our departed leader. He served his movement and his country loyally for over 7 decades. The struggle for freedom and democracy was his life. And the freedom that we enjoy today is his legacy to us. He was a product of the golden age of our struggle, when sacrifice and commitment to freedom was the only consideration that motivated leaders to be involved in the struggle. He belonged to the era when leaders were even prepared to die for the struggle for freedom. It was just a few weeks ago that we laid to rest his dear friend and comrade, Isithwalandwe Siaparangwe, Dennis Goldberg. To lose both of them in such quick succession is indeed a blow. The great cohort to which they belonged is now in full complement in the celestial realm. They join their comrades Nelson Mandela, Govan Mbeki, Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, Raymond Mhlaba, Elias Motsoaledi, Albertina Sisulu, Ahmed Kathrada, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and many others. We are sad to have lost our father, our grandfather, our great-grandfather, but we are also grateful as a nation for God's providence in enabling Tate Mlangeni to make old bones, as they say. We are reminded in the scriptures that gray hair is a crown of splendor and is attained in the way of righteousness. The Mlangeni family deeply mourns their father, who was the pillar of the family, as we have heard. The family, like those of other prisoners, suffered immensely during his years of imprisonment. The spirit of resilience saw the Mlangeni family through much more pain than many of us will ever know. For children to have grown up without their father, who was languishing on an island, is quite a lot of pain to go through. But through the faithfulness and support of his wife, the late June Mlangeni, Baba Mlangeni led his family from inside and outside prison, instilling in them courage and conviction. In paying tribute to him this day, we also pay tribute to Umama June Mlangeni and to the family for their sacrifices. We pay tribute to Mem Mlangeni for her activism and her leadership. It was she who was instrumental in mobilizing women in and around Dube in Soweto to participate in the 1955 women's protest in the streets of downtown Johannesburg and in the famous 1956 anti-pass march to the Union buildings. It was Umama June Mlangeni who endured police harassment and was placed under house arrest several times over the period of her husband's imprisonment. As this remarkable couple belonged together in life, so shall they forever remain together in our remembrance of them. While history will place Andrew Mlangeni in the pantheon of the great leaders of our nation, he will be remembered by his people as a person of humility, of humanity, and dignity. I saw his humility at close range when I was Secretary General of the African National Congress and saw how he deported himself towards members not only of the ANC but also our people as a whole. He will be remembered for his kindness, his boundless optimism, and for his mischievous humor as well. There was no task that Ubaba Mlangeni would not undertake in the service of the struggle and no responsibility that he would ever evade. As an activist in the Young Communist League, as the leader of the ANC Dube branch, and later secretary for the Soweto region, he was known as someone who sought to build unity and consensus at all times. He was known as someone who would draw others into the fold through engagement and persuasion. In prison, he made up for the opportunity he lacked outside and acquired 2 university degrees. He served our democratic parliament with great distinction. In the committees in which he served and led, he did so with diligence and also with wisdom. He pursued the building of a new, united nation with the same fervor and conviction that led him to join the armed struggle, to risk fortune and death, and to place his life in the hands of the people. Just as he fought to end that crime against humanity, so too would he take up the fight against inequality and poverty that continues to deny so many of our people so much of their humanity. In his statement during the Rivonia trial, he said, "South Africa, my Lord," as he addressed the judge, "is a very rich country. The resources could be exploited for the benefit of all who live in it. This government and the previous governments have exploited not the earth, but the people of various racial groups whose color is not white." Close quotes. Until he drew his last breath, it was his firm and unwavering determination to ensure that the plentiful resources of our country would be used for the benefit of all its people. It was his firm and unwavering determination that no person should claim domination over another, that no woman should be subordinated to any man, and that no child should fear abuse or hunger or discrimination. To the last, he fought for a society founded on the principles of equality and solidarity. We have lost not only a great patriot, but also a strident moral voice. Andrew Mlangeni was never afraid to confront the vices that can too easily engulf a nation emerging from a broken past. Just as he dedicated his life to ending the corruption of the human soul that apartheid typified, so too would he speak out against the greed and the avarice that threatened to erode our hard-won democracy. Always faithful to the principles of his movement, the African National Congress, always true to its revolutionary discipline, he understood his responsibility to challenge the abuse of power and also the plunder of public resources. He understood his responsibility to remind us of the solemn commitment we have made to future generations, and would not hesitate to tell us when we fell short or when we faltered. He would not be coward, and he was not a person to be silenced. When the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress asked him to lead the Integrity Commission, it had seen in him a leader who was the repository of the ethical leadership of the ANC. He took that position because he believed that leaders of the ANC should represent the best of ethical behavior and should know that our people expect that they should always be judged by a higher standard of ethical behavior. And so, if his passing does indeed mark the end of an era, we must ask ourselves the question, what now? What shall define this new era, our era? Will it be an era of adherence to the values of his glorious movement? Revolutionary ethics, revolutionary discipline? Will it be an era and an age of increasing prosperity and security for all? Will it represent the realization of the dream of the Freedom Charter and of a country that truly belongs to all who live in it, black and white? Will it witness the emergence of a new generation of young leaders, women and men of extraordinary talent, of extraordinary integrity and adherence to the best of values, who are resolved, who are dedicated to serve their people? This is a question to which all of us who are gathered here, whether in person or virtually or in spirit, should be held to answer. It is through our actions that we will define this new era, an era that Ubaba Mlangeni leaves behind. It is through the principles that we observe, the values that we hold dear, and through the responsibilities that we each take upon ourselves, that we will be able to forge a new society. Let us draw guidance and inspiration from the lives of Ubaba Andrew Mlangeni and the great leaders of his age. Let us honor their courage and their sacrifices by being conscientious in our conduct and honorable in our intentions. As they did, let us place the needs and the interests of our people at the center of our every policy, of our every strategy, and of every decision, and of our every act. We bid farewell to Ubaba Mlangeni at a time of great peril in our country and our world. A virus is sweeping the globe, causing widespread disruption and destruction. COVID-19 has cost many lives, and before it runs its course, it will take many more. It has cast into sharp focus the deep divisions within our societies and our nation, exposing the many ways in which inequality and injustice manifest themselves. The coronavirus pandemic has not rendered the fight against poverty and unemployment any less urgent. If anything, it has revealed how important the fundamental transformation of our economy and our society is for human health and well-being. This pandemic must bring us to action. It must heighten our ambition and our deep resolve. It is nearly 60 years since Andrew Mlangeni and his comrades made a bold and audacious statement to the world. And they said, open quotes, "The time comes in the life of any nation where there remain only two choices, submit or fight. That time has now come to South Africa. We shall not submit, and we have no choice but to hit back by all means within our power in defense of our people, our future, and our freedom," close quotes. These words may belong to another era, but their significance resonates across the decades. We are once again faced with a choice to submit or to fight. Let us declare here in honor and in memory of Andrew Mlangeni that we will not submit. We will not submit to coronavirus. We will defeat it. But let us also declare that we will not submit to poverty and inequality. We should also be bold enough to say we will not submit to corruption and greed, to mismanagement and complacency, and to the abuse of public resources. We will not submit to gender-based violence and femicide. We will not submit to the destruction of our planet, to the neglect of our children. We will not submit to despair and despondency or cynicism. We have no choice but to fight. To fight for equality and justice, for water and electricity and food in every home, for land to farm and factories to run, for quality health care, for decent education, for peace and safety. We have to fight for honest, committed and capable leaders, for democratic institutions that are strong and durable, for equality between men and women, for the rule of law and the realization of equal rights for all. For it is then, when we are engaged in this struggle, that we will pay our beloved father, leader, friend, and comrade the great and the most enduring tribute. Andrew Mlangeni has departed from this world, but his legacy, his values, and his struggle lives on in each of us. His commitment goes beyond what was expected of him as an ANC member, and his memory will be deeply embedded in the hearts of many South Africans for a long, long time to come.